I tried to hug my grandson, but my daughter stopped me and said, "This old woman isn't part of the family. Your real grandma lives in another country." She didn't know I owned the building they lived in. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I'm Beverly, and at 70 years old, I thought I had experienced every kind of heartbreak life could offer. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning when I decided to surprise my grandchildren with homemade cookies. I had spent hours in my kitchen the night before, baking their favorite chocolate chip cookies, the same recipe I'd used when Hannah was little. The smell filled my small apartment, bringing back memories of better times when my daughter actually seemed to love me. I walked the 4 blocks to the building where Hannah lived with my 2 grandchildren, Tommy and Sarah, ages 8 and 6. The doorman, Miguel, greeted me with his usual warm smile. He'd seen me come and go for 3 years now, always carrying some treat or gift for the kids. "Good morning, Mrs. Beverly. The kids will be so happy to see you." If only he knew what was about to happen. I took the elevator to the 15th floor, my heart beating with anticipation. I hadn't seen Tommy and Sarah in 2 weeks. Hannah had been making excuses lately about why I couldn't visit. "They're busy with school," she'd say, "or they have playdates." But I missed them terribly. I knocked on the door of apartment 15B, holding the container of cookies against my chest. When the door opened, Hannah's face immediately darkened. "What are you doing here, Beverly?" The way she said my name stung. "No, Mom, no warmth. Just Beverly, like I was a stranger bothering her. I brought cookies for Tommy and Sarah. I thought maybe we could." "They're not available." Her voice was sharp, final. But then I heard their little voices from inside. "Mommy, who is it? Can we see?" My heart lifted. "Tommy? Sarah? It's Grandma." Hannah's expression turned ice cold. She stepped outside and partially closed the door behind her, blocking my view of the children. "Listen to me very carefully. Before I tell you more about my story, I want to ask, have you ever felt muscle or joint pain like I have? Best Joint Care is a natural supplement that goes straight to the root of the pain, so you can move more freely and enjoy life again. Thousands of people have already said goodbye to joint pain. You could be next. Click the link pinned in the comments to get yours. Now back to my story," she whispered, her voice like a knife. "You need to stop this fantasy that you're their grandmother." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What are you talking about? I am their grandmother." "No," Hannah said loudly, loud enough for the children to hear from inside. "You're not family. You're just some lonely old woman who keeps bothering us." The words hit me like a physical blow. I heard Tommy's confused voice from inside. "But Mommy, isn't that Grandma Beverly?" Hannah raised her voice even more. "No, honey. Grandma lives in Switzerland, remember? She's very wealthy and sends you beautiful gifts. This old lady is nobody important." I stood there, frozen, as my daughter continued her performance. "Your real grandmother is sophisticated and successful. She lives in a beautiful mansion overseas. This woman," Hannah gestured at me dismissively, "is just someone who pretends to be related to us." I could hear Sarah's small voice. "Why does she pretend, Mommy?" "Because some people are sad and lonely, sweetheart. But we don't need to worry about her." The container of cookies slipped from my hands and crashed to the floor. The sound echoed in the hallway like my breaking heart. Hannah looked down at the mess with disgust. "Look what you've done. Clean that up and leave us alone." I knelt down, my arthritic knees protesting, and began picking up the broken pieces of the container and scattered cookies. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grasp anything. As I cleaned, I heard Hannah tell the children to go to their rooms. "The strange lady will be gone soon," she assured them. When I finally stood up, cookies and plastic pieces clutched in my trembling hands, Hannah was staring at me with something I could only describe as contempt. "If you come here again, I'll call security," she said quietly. "Tommy and Sarah don't need confusion in their lives. They have a grandmother who matters, who can actually provide for them. You're just nobody." The door slammed in my face. I stood there in the hallway for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The weight of her words pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Nobody. That's what my own daughter thought of me. But as I walked slowly toward the elevator, something else pressed against my chest, my purse, and inside it, the deed to apartment 15B. The same apartment where my daughter lived rent-free. raising my grandchildren in a space I had purchased 3 years ago specifically so they could have a good home. Hannah had no idea that the apartment she called home, the address she used for their school registration, the place where she entertained her friends and built her life, it all belonged to me. She had just called me nobody, not knowing that she was living in my property, breathing air in rooms I paid for, sleeping under a roof that existed because of my generosity. As the elevator descended, I made a decision that would change everything. Hannah wanted to play games about who mattered and who didn't. She was about to learn exactly how much this nobody could affect her perfect little world. 3 days passed before I could bring myself to leave my apartment again. The humiliation burned in my chest like acid, replaying Hannah's words over and over. Nobody important. Just some lonely old woman. But beneath the hurt, something else was growing: curiosity. I needed to understand what Hannah had told those children about me, about their family. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I began to investigate my own daughter. It started innocently enough. I called my neighbor Mrs. Chun, whose grandson went to the same school as Tommy and Sarah. "Oh, Beverly," she said when I asked about the children. "Tommy mentioned you the other day. Such a sweet boy, but he seemed confused about something." My heart clenched. Confused about what? Well, he was telling my grandson about his grandmother in Switzerland. Said she sends expensive presents and lives in a castle. Then he asked why you looked so much like the pictures his mother showed him of his other grandmother who died. I nearly dropped the phone. His other grandmother who died? Yes, that's what he called you. He said his mother told him you were his grandmother's sister who got confused sometimes and thought you were her. How long would it take? If you wanted her out? 2 weeks' notice would be legally sufficient since she's not paying rent and has no written agreement. The power of that knowledge settled in my chest like a warm stone. 2 weeks. I could have Hannah out of her apartment in 2 weeks. But that wasn't what I wanted. Not yet. What I need, I said carefully, is to understand all my options. I want to know exactly what rights I have as the property owner. For the next hour, Mr. Patterson explained everything. I could evict Hannah immediately. I could start charging her rent retroactively. I could deny any modifications to the property. I could even move in myself if I chose to, since my name was the only one on the deed. "There's one more thing," he said, consulting his notes. "You mentioned she's been applying for credit using the apartment as collateral?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "If someone lists a property address as their residence and implies ownership, and then uses that to secure loans or credit cards, that could constitute fraud. Have you checked to see if any liens have been placed on your property?" I hadn't even considered that possibility. 2 days later, I sat in my apartment with a credit report and property records that made my hands shake with rage. Hannah had indeed been busy. She had opened 3 credit cards in the past year, using the apartment address and listing her occupation as property manager. She'd taken out a personal loan for $15,000, using the apartment as collateral by claiming she was the owner's daughter with inheritance rights. Most shocking of all, she had somehow managed to get pre-approved for a home equity line of credit against my apartment. The bank had sent the paperwork to the apartment address, and Hannah had apparently been intercepting my mail. I called Mr. Patterson immediately. "This is serious, Beverly. She's committed fraud, and she's put your property at risk. We need to act quickly to protect your interests. What do you recommend?" "First, we secure your property with proper documentation. Then we address the fraud. But Beverly, this is going to get ugly. Your daughter could face criminal charges." I sat in silence for a long moment. Despite everything Hannah had done, the thought of her in legal trouble made my chest tight. She was still my daughter, still the little girl I had raised and loved. Is there another way? We could handle this privately, but she'd need to cooperate fully. That means paying back any money she's fraudulently obtained, canceling any applications made using your property, and agreeing to formal terms for her continued residence. And if she refuses, then we pursue criminal charges and eviction. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to the apartment building and sat in the parking garage just thinking. Through the concrete and steel above me, Hannah was probably tucking Tommy and Sarah into bed, reading them stories, being the mother I had always tried to be to her. She had no idea that her entire life was built on a foundation I could remove with a single phone call. But watching other families come and go in the garage, seeing children laugh with their parents, I realized something important. This wasn't just about Hannah anymore. Tommy and Sarah were innocent in all of this. They didn't deserve to have their lives upended because their mother was a liar and a fraud. I needed a plan that would give me back my dignity and my place in their lives without destroying their stability. Hannah had created this mess with her lies, but I was going to solve it my way. Over the next week, I began to gather more information. I befriended Mrs. Walsh, the elderly woman who lived across the hall from Hannah. She was lonely and loved to talk, and she had been watching my daughter's activities for 3 years. She's always bringing different men around, Mrs. Walsh confided over tea in her apartment. Claims she owns the place, you know. Tells them all about her inheritance and how successful she is. What kind of men? Well-dressed ones. The kind who drive expensive cars. She's always dressed up when they come by, acting like she's quite the catch. Mrs. Walsh showed me to her window, which had a perfect view of the apartment building's entrance. See that man there? He's been coming around twice a week for the past month. Drives that silver BMW. Hannah told me he's some kind of investment banker, and she's been impressing him with stories about her real estate portfolio. I watched as a handsome man in his 40s emerged from the building, checking his phone as he walked to his car. Hannah appeared at her window, waving goodbye with a smile that looked more calculated than romantic. She's using the apartment to attract wealthy men, I realized. Oh yes, Mrs. Walsh agreed. She throws little dinner parties sometimes, always talks about how she inherited the place, and what good investments since her family had. The children seem confused by it all though. Confused how? Well, little Tommy asked me once if his mommy really owned the apartment, because he remembered when they moved in and she cried because she was so grateful to someone. He couldn't understand why she would cry if it was already hers. My heart ached for my grandson, trying to make sense of his mother's lies. That night, I called Mr. Patterson with my decision. I want to handle this strategically, I told him. I don't want to destroy her life, but I want her to understand exactly what she's risking. And I want my grandchildren back. What do you have in mind? I want you to prepare all the legal documentation, eviction notices, fraud reports, everything. But I don't want to file anything yet. I want Hannah to know that I have the power to take everything away from her. And then I want to offer her a choice. What kind of choice? The truth or the consequences? Mrs. Walsh turned out to be the perfect accomplice, though she didn't know she was helping me set a trap. She loved gossip almost as much as she loved her afternoon tea, and she had become the unofficial information hub for the entire 15th floor. Beverly, dear, she said when I visited her the following Tuesday, you should have seen the excitement yesterday. Hannah was practically bouncing off the walls. I sipped my tea and tried to look casually interested. Oh, what happened? That banker fellow, the one with the BMW? He brought her flowers and told her he's been thinking about making some real estate investments. Asked if she might be interested in showing him some of the properties in her portfolio. My stomach clenched. Hannah was about to dig herself even deeper into fraud, using my apartment to impress potential investors. She was so excited, Mrs. Walsh continued. She invited all the neighbors for drinks this Friday. Said she wanted to celebrate her success and show off her home to everyone. Perfect. Hannah was throwing a party in my apartment, probably planning to brag about her real estate acumen to everyone within earshot. Did she invite everyone on the floor? Oh yes, and some of the people from downstairs too. She's been going door to door, talking about what a lovely home she has and how proud she is of what she's built. What she built. The audacity took my breath away. I spent the rest of the week preparing. I called the building's management company and requested copies of all communication with Hannah. I reviewed my property deed and insurance policies. Most importantly, I had a long conversation with Mr. Patterson about exactly what I planned to do. Beverly, are you sure about this approach? Once you reveal yourself as the property owner in front of all those people, there's no taking it back. Good, I said firmly. Hannah has been lying to these people for 3 years. It's time they knew the truth. And your daughter? How do you think she'll react? I was quiet for a long moment. She'll be furious. But she'll also be cornered. And that's when people show their true character. Friday evening arrived with a crisp autumn chill. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple but elegant navy dress and the pearls my husband had given me for our 40th anniversary. I wanted to look like what I was, a respectable woman who had worked hard and saved her money to provide for her family. At exactly 7:30, I walked through the building lobby. Miguel, the doorman, looked surprised to see me dressed up. "Good evening, Mrs. Beverly. You look lovely tonight." "Thank you, Miguel. I'm going to a party." I took the elevator to the 15th floor, my heart pounding with each ascending number. I could hear music and laughter coming from apartment 15B, my apartment. Mrs. Walsh opened her door as I approached. "Beverly, how wonderful that you could make it. Hannah will be so surprised." Oh, she would be surprised, all right. I knocked on the door of my own apartment. When Hannah opened it, glass of wine in hand and wearing a cocktail dress I was certain cost more than her monthly income, her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and finally poorly concealed panic. "Beverly, what are you doing here?" Behind her, I could see at least 20 people mingling in the living room I had furnished, drinking wine and eating appetizers off dishes I had bought. "Mrs. Walsh invited me," I said pleasantly. "I hope you don't mind. It's such a lovely party." Hannah's grip tightened on her wine glass. She couldn't refuse me entry without looking rude in front of her guests, but she also couldn't let me in without risking her carefully constructed lies. "Of course," she said through gritted teeth. "Please come in." The apartment looked beautiful. Hannah had good taste, I had to give her that. She'd arranged the furniture perfectly, chosen lovely decorations, and created a warm, inviting atmosphere. It was exactly the kind of home I had envisioned when I bought it for her family. Several people approached me immediately. "You must be Hannah's friend," said a woman in an expensive-looking suit. "I'm Caroline from apartment 12A. Hannah's told us so much about her family." "Has she?" I replied, accepting a glass of wine from a passing tray. "How interesting. What has she said?" "Oh, about her inheritance, her business success. She's quite inspiring, really. A single mother who's managed to build such a lovely life for herself and her children." I glanced across the room where Hannah was talking animatedly to the banker, gesturing around the apartment as if she were giving a tour of her personal achievements. "Yes," I said carefully. "She's certainly built something here." As the evening progressed, I moved through the party, listening to conversations. Hannah had told everyone essentially the same story. She was a successful entrepreneur who had inherited the apartment from a wealthy relative. She was considering expanding her real estate portfolio and was always looking for good investment opportunities. The banker seemed particularly interested. I overheard him asking detailed questions about her other properties and her family's investment strategies. "My aunt was very smart about real estate," Hannah was saying. "She taught me everything I know about property values and market timing." I almost choked on my wine. Her aunt was standing 20 feet away, listening to every word. Mrs. Walsh appeared at my elbow. "Isn't it wonderful how well Hannah has done for herself? She was just telling me about the renovations she's planning for next year." "Renovations?" "Oh yes. She's thinking about updating the kitchen and expanding the master bathroom. She said she's got approval from the property management company and everything. The same renovations that would cost $12,000 and that I had explicitly denied." It was time. I walked over to where Hannah was holding court with the banker and several other neighbors. She saw me approaching and her face tightened, but she couldn't escape without abandoning her audience. "Hannah dear," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "this is such a lovely party. You've done such wonderful things with the apartment." "Thank you," she replied stiffly. "I was just telling everyone about the renovations you're planning." Mrs. Walsh chimed in helpfully. $12,000 for the bathroom alone. Hannah said the property management company approved everything. Hannah's face went pale. "Well, that's still being discussed." "Oh, but I spoke to them just yesterday," I said innocently. "They mentioned they were waiting for final approval from the property owner." The banker looked interested. "Property owner? I thought you owned this place, Hannah." "Before I tell you more about my story, I want to ask, have you ever felt muscle or joint pain like I have?" Best Joint Care is a natural supplement that goes straight to the root of the pain, so you can move more freely and enjoy life again. Thousands of people have already said goodbye to joint pain. You could be next. Click the link pinned in the comments to get yours. Now back to my story. Hannah's laugh sounded forced. Well, technically, there are some legal details being worked out. Legal details? Caroline from 12A looked confused. But you said you inherited it. I took a sip of wine and smiled gently. Perhaps I can help clarify things. You see, I am the property owner. The room went quiet except for the soft jazz music playing in the background. Hannah's face went from pale to bright red. Beverly, you're confused. You don't need to. I bought this apartment 3 years ago, I continued pleasantly, as a gift for my daughter and grandchildren. I thought it would give them stability and a lovely place to call home. The banker set down his glass with a sharp clink. Your daughter. Hannah opened her mouth but no words came out. Yes, I said, looking directly at her. Hannah is my daughter. Tommy and Sarah are my grandchildren. Though they've been told I'm just some lonely old woman who pretends to be family. The silence in the room was deafening. Every eye was on Hannah, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. But the trap was only half sprung. Now came the real test. What would Hannah do when her world of lies collapsed around her? The silence that followed my revelation lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. I watched Hannah's face cycle through emotions. Shock, panic, rage, and finally, a cold calculation I recognized from her childhood when she'd been caught in lies. The banker was the first to speak. I'm sorry, I think there's been some confusion. Hannah, you told me you inherited this apartment from your aunt. Hannah's laugh was sharp and brittle. There's no confusion. This woman is. She's mentally unwell. She has delusions about being my mother. I felt the familiar sting of her cruelty, but this time I was prepared for it. How sad, I said gently, pulling out my phone. I suppose these documents from the property management company are delusions too? I showed the screen to the banker, who leaned in to read. Property deed, insurance papers, correspondence about renovation requests. He looked up at Hannah with new understanding. You don't own this apartment at all, do you? Hannah's wine glass trembled in her hand. She's a sick old woman who bought an apartment and now thinks that makes her my mother. I've been trying to handle this quietly, but she keeps inserting herself into our lives. Mrs. Walsh gasped. But Hannah, you've told us so many stories about your family, about your successful business, your inheritance. None of that was lies, Hannah said desperately. I do have business success. I work very hard to provide for my children. At a boutique part-time, I added quietly, making $12 an hour. The room was watching like spectators at a tennis match, their heads turning between Hannah and me with each exchange. Caroline from 12A looked uncomfortable. Maybe we should go. This seems like a family matter. No, Hannah said quickly. Don't leave. This woman is trying to ruin my life because I won't play along with her fantasies. But people were already setting down glasses, making excuses, heading toward the door. The banker left without another word, and I could see Hannah's dreams of impressing him crumbling. Within 10 minutes, only Mrs. Walsh remained, and she was hovering uncertainly by the door. I think I'll just check on my cat, she mumbled and fled. Hannah slammed the door behind the last guest and turned to face me. The mask was completely off now, and what I saw underneath was pure fury. How dare you, she hissed. How dare you humiliate me like that? I humiliated you? I set down my wine glass carefully. Hannah, you've been lying to these people for 3 years. You've been lying to your own children about who I am. Because you're nothing. The words exploded out of her. You're a pathetic old woman who never accomplished anything in her life, and I refuse to let my children think that's what they should aspire to. Each word was designed to wound, and they did. But they also revealed something I needed to hear. So you invented a wealthy grandmother in Switzerland? I gave them something to be proud of. Someone successful, someone who matters. Not some retired secretary living in a cramped apartment, baking cookies and trying to buy love. Trying to buy love? I repeated softly. Is that what you think this apartment is? Hannah gestured around the room wildly. What else would it be? You buy me things, you pay for things, and then you expect gratitude and affection in return. It's manipulative and pathetic. I stared at my daughter, really looked at her and saw a stranger. I bought this apartment because I wanted my grandchildren to have a stable home. I wanted you to have security so you could focus on being a good mother instead of worrying about rent. Well, congratulations. Your plan worked. I am focused on being a good mother, which means protecting my children from people who might hurt them. People like their grandmother? People like you. Hannah's voice was getting louder, and I worried she might wake Tommy and Sarah. You think because you have money you can control our lives. You think you can buy your way into being important to us. I felt something break inside my chest. I've never tried to control your life, Hannah. I've only tried to help. By making me dependent on you? By putting me in a position where I have to be grateful for every scrap of attention you give us. I never asked for gratitude. I asked for respect. I asked to be allowed to love my grandchildren. Hannah laughed, and it was the ugliest sound I'd ever heard from her. Love? You don't know what love is. Love is what I do for Tommy and Sarah every day. Working to give them a better life, protecting them from disappointment, teaching them to have standards. By lying to them about their family? By giving them hope. By showing them that they can be more than this. She gestured at me dismissively. I looked around the apartment, my apartment, at the life I had made possible for her, and I felt the last thread of maternal obligation snap. You're right, Hannah. You are protecting them. You're protecting them from knowing they have a grandmother who loves them unconditionally. You're protecting them from someone who would never judge them or make them feel like they have to earn affection. Hannah's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. It means I'm done pretending this arrangement works for anyone. You've made it clear how you feel about me, about my place in your life and theirs. Good. Finally. I turned back to face her. You should know that I've been in contact with my lawyer. About the fraudulent loan applications, the credit cards you've opened using this address, the home equity line you've been trying to secure against my property. Hannah's face went white. You can't prove anything. I have copies of everything, Hannah. Your signatures, your social security number, your claims of ownership. Mr. Patterson says it's a clear case of fraud. She sank into one of the chairs I had bought for her, the fight suddenly going out of her. What do you want? She whispered. I looked at my daughter, this angry, frightened woman who had somehow grown from the little girl I used to rock to sleep, and I felt tired. So very tired. I want you to tell me why you hate me so much that you'd rather commit fraud than admit I'm your mother. Hannah was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and broken. Because if you're my mother, then I'm just like you. And I can't be just like you. The honesty of it hit me like a physical blow, but it also gave me clarity. Hannah wasn't just rejecting me. She was rejecting the possibility of being ordinary, of being someone who worked hard but never got rich, who loved deeply but wasn't sophisticated, who gave everything but never received recognition for it. She was terrified of becoming me. And that fear had turned her into someone I no longer recognized as my daughter. I stood there in the silence that followed Hannah's confession, and for the first time in 3 years, I saw my daughter clearly. Not the successful single mother she pretended to be, not the ungrateful child I'd been telling myself she was, but a woman so afraid of being ordinary that she'd built her entire life on lies. Hannah, I said softly, there's nothing wrong with being like me. She looked up from the chair, tears streaming down her face. Isn't there? You worked your whole life, and what do you have to show for it? A tiny apartment, no husband, no real success. You're just surviving. I sat down across from her, in the living room of the apartment I'd bought her, and considered her words. You're right, I said finally. I am just surviving. But I'm surviving with dignity, without lies, without hurting people who love me. Hannah wiped her eyes, smearing her carefully applied makeup. I never meant to hurt anyone. But you did. You hurt me, and you hurt Tommy and Sarah by denying them their grandmother. I was protecting them. From what? From someone who would love them no matter what? From someone who would always be there for them. Hannah was quiet for a long moment. I wanted them to have more than I had growing up. What did you lack growing up? Everything. The word burst out of her. We never had enough money. You work so hard just to pay bills. I wore clothes from thrift stores. I couldn't have friends over because I was embarrassed about our apartment. I swore my children would never feel that shame. I felt the pieces clicking into place. So you decided to create a fantasy. I decided to give them hope. To show them that our family could be successful, could be important. By erasing me. Hannah's shoulders sagged. I thought it would be temporary. I thought I'd figure out how to actually become successful. And then I could bring you back into their lives as their real grandmother. But it got easier to keep lying. She nodded miserably. Each lie required another lie. And then when people started treating me differently, when they respected me because they thought I was successful, I couldn't give that up. I looked around the apartment again, seeing it through different eyes. What about the banker? The loan applications? I was going to start a real estate business. I thought if I could just get enough capital, I could make it all true. I could actually become the person I've been pretending to be. Using my apartment as collateral for loans you couldn't pay back. I thought I could figure it out. I always figure things out. I stood up and walked to the window again. The city looked the same as it had an hour ago, but everything felt different now. Hannah, I'm going to give you a choice. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I can pursue criminal charges for the fraud. I can evict you from this apartment. I can make sure everyone knows exactly what you've been doing. Hannah's face went pale again. Or, I continued, we can start over. But if we start over, it's going to be with the truth. Complete honesty. No more lies about who I am. No more fantasies about Swiss grandmothers. No more pretending you own this apartment. What would that look like? I turned back to face her. You continue living here, but you acknowledge that this is my apartment and I'm letting you stay. You introduce me to Tommy and Sarah as their grandmother. You stop the fraudulent loan applications and pay back what you've already taken. And you get help. Help. Therapy. For whatever is making you so afraid of being ordinary that you'd rather be a criminal. Hannah was quiet for a long time. And if I don't agree? Then you'll be out of here in 2 weeks, and you'll be dealing with fraud charges while you're trying to find a new place to live. She buried her face in her hands. I can't afford therapy. I can barely afford groceries. I'll pay for the therapy. And I'll continue to help with expenses, but only if you agree to honesty. Why would you do that after everything I've done? I sat back down across from her. Because you're my daughter. Because Tommy and Sarah deserve stability. And because I'm tired of pretending I don't love you. Hannah looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the little girl she used to be. I don't know how to stop lying. One truth at a time. 3 weeks later, I was in my apartment baking cookies when I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, Tommy and Sarah stood in the hallway with Hannah behind them. Grandma Beverly? Tommy said uncertainly. Mom says you really are our grandmother. I knelt down so I was at their eye level. I really am. But what about our other grandmother in Switzerland? Sarah asked. I looked up at Hannah, who took a deep breath. There is no other grandmother, Hannah said. I made that up because I was scared and confused. Grandma Beverly is your only grandmother. And she loves you very much. Sarah looked confused. Why did you make it up? Hannah knelt down beside me. Because sometimes adults make mistakes when they're scared. And I was scared that you wouldn't think I was a good enough mother. That's silly, Tommy said. You're the best mother. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. I'm trying to be better. That afternoon we sat in my small apartment, the same one Hannah had been embarrassed about. And I told my grandchildren stories about their mother when she was little. I showed them pictures of Hannah's school plays, her science fair projects, her first day of kindergarten. You look just like Mom, Sarah said, studying a photo of Hannah at age 6. She looks like me, I corrected gently. And someday you might look like both of us. Hannah was quiet through most of the visit, but when it was time to leave, she hugged me. It was awkward and brief, but it was real. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For not giving up on me. As I watched them walk away, Tommy holding one of Hannah's hands and Sarah holding the other, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Hannah still lived in my apartment, but now she acknowledged it. She was seeing a therapist twice a week, working through her fears about being ordinary. She'd gotten a second job to help pay back the money she'd borrowed fraudulently. Most importantly, she'd started telling the truth. It wasn't easy. There were still days when she slipped back into old patterns, when the temptation to embellish or lie was too strong. But she was trying, and that was enough. Tommy and Sarah came to visit me every Sunday now. We baked cookies, worked on puzzles, and talked about their week. They never asked about the grandmother in Switzerland again, but sometimes Sarah would say things like, "Grandma Beverly, will you tell us more stories about when you were young?" And I would tell them about working my way through college, about meeting their grandfather, about the ordinary life I'd built with love and hard work and dignity. "Were you ever rich, Grandma?" Tommy asked one Sunday. I looked around my small apartment at my second-hand furniture and my modest belongings, and then at my grandchildren's faces. "I'm rich now," I said, and for the first time in my life I truly meant it.